June 2019, the quiet Bavarian town of Kronach faced an industrial silence it had narrowly escaped 6 years earlier. Inside a sprawling production complex nestled among the rolling hills of Upper Franconia, assembly lines that once built some of the most expensive and sophisticated televisions in Europe came to an abrupt halt. Loewe, a name that had stood for elite German engineering since the days of vacuum tubes and black and white broadcasts, filed for insolvency. It was the second time in less than a decade that the historic company had collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. For decades, a Loewe television was not merely a household appliance. It was a heavy metallic statement of architectural furniture, often costing as much as a used car. Yet brilliant design and meticulous local assembly could not shield the brand from the relentless tide of cheap global flat panels, software platform monopolies, and brutal scale disadvantages. Hundreds of skilled workers faced pink slips, the factory doors locked, the trademark was stripped away and sold to a foreign holding fund. And yet, unlike dozens of its historic European competitors that vanished into industrial history books, the story did not end there. Within months, new capital arrived, the assembly lines flickered back to life, and the iconic script logo reappeared on ultra-thin OLED glass. But the real story of Loewe is not a simple tale of corporate survival. It is the tense, revealing history of what happens when a boutique European manufacturer tries to build luxury items in a world engineered for disposable electronics. Welcome to European Television Brand Memories. Today we investigate the rise, double collapse, and defiant resurrection of Loewe, the stubborn heart of German television craftsmanship. To understand how a television brand became synonymous with uncompromising luxury, we have to travel back to Weimar-era Berlin. On January 2, 1923, an enterprising businessman named David Ludwig Loewe and two brilliant engineers, Gerhard Grüttner and Erwin Buttermilk, established Radio Frequenz GmbH. Within a year, leadership fell to David Ludwig's brother, Sigmund Loewe, a physicist and visionary whose technical intuition would shape European electronics for half a century. In March 1923, Sigmund Loewe demonstrated a small tube broadcasting device for German President Friedrich Ebert. Ebert was so captivated by the crackling music and speech filling the room that he personally encouraged the German post office to open the airwaves to commercial broadcasting. Loewe was there at the exact birth of European mass radio. The company's early engineering genius crystallized around a concept that terrified mass-market competitors: integration. Instead of building radios out of discrete, fragile components that were expensive to wire, Loewe pioneered the multiple tube, placing multiple amplifier stages inside a single evacuated glass envelope. It lowered production costs, increased reliability, and made Loewe a household name across Germany before the Second World War. When Allied bombing flattened their Berlin facilities in 1945, the company did not die. It packed its remaining blueprints, machinery, and surviving engineers into trucks and moved south to Kronach, a quiet medieval town in Upper Franconia, right near the inner German border. It was a geographical pivot that would define the company's identity for the next 80 years. In Kronach, amid picturesque forests and old stone walls, Loewe rebuilt. By the 1950s, the economic miracle of West Germany was filling living rooms with radio cabinets and eventually the flickering blue-gray glow of cathode ray tubes. In 1961, Loewe introduced the Opticord 500, the first European video recorder built for professional use. 2 years later, they released the Optiport, a portable television with a 25-centimeter screen and a built-in FM radio designed to be carried out to the garden or balcony. The television had officially transitioned from a scientific curiosity into portable domestic furniture. But as global competition accelerated through the 1960s, family ownership reached its natural limit. Following the death of Sigmund Loewe in 1962, the Philips Group acquired a controlling majority of shares. Under Dutch corporate guidance, Loewe specialized deeper into television development, launching its first color sets in 1967 just as PAL Color Broadcasting went live across Germany. The television had entered the German home as an engineered marvel. The factory in Kronach had not yet revealed the immense cost of staying independent. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, European consumer electronics were being squeezed from both sides. Japanese giants like Sony, Panasonic, and Toshiba were flooding the market with mass-produced, highly reliable color televisions that undercut European production costs. Many historic brands, such as Saba, Nordmend, and Telefunken, succumbed to absorption, foreign acquisition, or quiet liquidation. Loewe faced a stark existential choice: race to the bottom against Asian mass production, or abandon the mass market entirely. Under a series of management buyouts and a public stock offering in the 1990s, Loewe made a radical decision. They would stop trying to sell cheap televisions to everyone. They would build exceptionally expensive, beautifully designed televisions for people who viewed their living rooms as architectural showcases. This strategic pivot materialized physically in the chassis and the cabinet. While competitors wrapped their internal circuits in cheap, injection-molded black plastic, Loewe turned to brushed aluminum, polished glass, custom-milled chrome, and acoustic fabric designed in collaboration with textile specialists. The picture tube, the heavy glass vacuum vessel that formed the heart of every CRT set, was housed within sculptural, geometric enclosures that look like modern art. Technologically, Loewe did not invent the raw cathode ray tube. They bought high-grade picture tubes from suppliers like Philips or Thomson. Their genius lay in what surrounded that glass. They engineered modular chassis architectures that allowed repair technicians to slide out circuit boards like drawers, making servicing clean and precise. They integrated digital tuners, hard disk recording systems inside the television long before external set-top boxes became common, and user interfaces that felt closer to high-end hi-fi audio gear than standard consumer electronics. When a customer walked into a specialist German audiovisual boutique in the late 1990s, the difference was immediate. A standard mass-market television sat on a plastic pedestal, surrounded by competing discount brands and hypermarket aisles. A Loewe television rested on a motorized chrome floor stand that could be swiveled smoothly with a heavy, machined aluminum remote control. The price tag was astronomical, often 3 to 4 times that of a conventional set. Yet for doctors, lawyers, architects, and design enthusiasts, the premium was justified by build quality and understated aesthetic restraint. The product solved the aesthetic problem of the living room. It made the intrusive black box look like high furniture. The product solved one problem and created another. By tying its entire financial survival to the high-end design niche, Loewe had handcuffed its fortunes to a specific manufacturing rhythm and a very fragile customer base. By the turn of the millennium, Loewe was living its golden age. The brand had successfully shaken off its image as just another mid-tier German manufacturer and re-emerged as the undisputed king of European lifestyle television. Walk into a high-end apartment in Munich, Frankfurt, or Milan in the year 2000, and you would likely find a Loewe Aventos or a Loewe Art Digital CRT dominating the space. These televisions were heavy, deep, and remarkably bright. Their curved glass screens were masterpieces of geometry, and their integrated soundbars, often developed with acoustic specialists, delivered audio fidelity that rendered external stereo speakers unnecessary for casual viewing. In Kronach, the factory floor was a humming monument to European industrial pride. Hundreds of workers, many of whom belonged to families that had worked for Loewe for 2 generations, screwed together aluminum panels, tested circuit boards, and calibrated color accuracy by hand. Unlike automated assembly lines in low-cost jurisdictions, the Kronach plant retained an artisanal rhythm. Every television that rolled off the line was treated like a bespoke instrument. This was also the era of the Loewe individual line, a modular television system that allowed buyers to customize the color panels, side inlays, speaker grills, and mounting options to match their exact living room interior. If your walls were cherry wood, your television could wear cherry wood trim. If your apartment was minimalist industrial concrete, brushed aluminum bezels matched your kitchen counters. Retail distribution was strictly controlled. Loewe refused to supply hypermarkets or discount warehouse stores. Their products were sold exclusively through authorized independent specialist dealers who offered white glove delivery, custom home theater installation, and direct repair support. If a component failed, a technician from the local dealer didn't throw the set away. They drove out to the house, opened the back panel, and replaced the specific modular board. At its peak, Loewe represented a rare and vital stake in European industrial culture. The belief that complex consumer electronics could still be designed, engineered, and assembled locally, resisting the gravitational pull of Asian mass production. What would be lost if this brand, factory, or television system disappeared? Not just a logo, but an entire regional ecosystem of specialized craftsmanship, independent retail trust, and the stubborn conviction that a television could be a permanent piece of European domestic architecture rather than a disposable plastic screen. The brand appeared strongest just as its weakness became structural. The first small crack did not sound like a bankruptcy notice. It sounded like silence in the research and development department. In 2002 and 2003, the global consumer electronics industry underwent the fastest and most brutal technological displacement in its history. The heavy cathode ray tube, which Loewe had mastered over 7 decades, was abruptly rendered obsolete by the triumph of flat-panel liquid crystal displays. Consumers fell in love with thin, lightweight screens that could hang on a wall. For Loewe, the transition was catastrophic. Their entire manufacturing expertise, their heavy glass supply chains, their high-margin CRT chassis designs, and their heavy factory tooling in Kronach were tied to a dying technology. Worse, Loewe could not manufacture raw LCD or plasma panels themselves. Unlike Samsung, LG, or Sony, which poured billions into massive semiconductor and display fab plants across Asia, Loewe was forced to buy raw display panels from outside suppliers and wrap them in their custom aluminum chassis. Scale disadvantage instantly became an insurmountable trap. When global competitors ordered millions of LCD panels, they dictated rock-bottom component prices. Loewe, ordering in boutique quantities, paid premium prices for the exact same raw glass. Yet they could not infinitely raise retail prices without pricing themselves out of even the luxury market. Simultaneously, the retail landscape shifted underneath them. Independent specialist dealers, the loyal backbone of Loewe's distribution network, were squeezed out by massive box retail chains and online e-commerce platforms. Consumers, who once relied on a local dealer's advice, now compared prices on the internet and bought mass-market Korean or Japanese flat screens for a fraction of the cost. By the late 2000s, the economic storm clouds gathered. Loewe struggled to adapt to the fast-moving software demands of smart TVs. While tech giants poured millions into developing complex operating systems and streaming app integrations for Netflix and YouTube, Loewe lagged behind, lacking the massive software engineering teams required to keep pace. Their televisions were physical masterpieces running software that felt increasingly sluggish compared to nimble global competitors. Losses mounted. The fixed costs of maintaining a high-tech factory and hundreds of engineering jobs in Kronach weighed heavily against shrinking sales volumes. In July 2013, the inevitable happened. Loewe AG filed for insolvency protection. The company briefly survived a self-administered restructuring backed by Munich-based private equity firm Stargate Capital in 2014. Jobs were slashed, operations were downsized. For a few years, it seemed the luxury formula had stabilized, but the underlying structural disease had not been cured. Trapped between low-cost mass manufacturers dominating retail volume and tech conglomerates controlling software and panel standards, Loewe's margins evaporated. In June 2019, the second collapse arrived. This time, it wasn't just a restructuring. It was total operational liquidation. The assembly lines in Kronach stopped cold. Creditors circled. The historic brand name was peeled away from the corporate entity and sold off to a British investment fund. Workers left the gate. The machinery went cold. The bins emptied. The trademark sat stranded. Legacy and outro. 1930-23. Music. The first crack sounded like a missed software update. The final silence sounded like locked factory gates in Kronach. Yet the Loewe story refused to end in bankruptcy court. In December 2019, a Cyprus-based investment company affiliated with Skytech Group Ltd., led by Aslan Kabliev, stepped in and acquired 100% of the Loewe brand and trademarks. Unlike asset strippers who buy famous names merely to slap them onto cheap imported appliances, Skytech made a stunning counter-commitment. They would restore production right back where it belonged, in Kronach, Upper Franconia. By 2020 and 2021, Loewe Technology GmbH was born. The new owners acquired tens of thousands of square meters of land and buildings from the town of Kronik, hired back dozens of veteran engineers and assembly specialists, re-established supply chains with premium OLED panel makers like LG Display, and launched a renewed generation of luxury screens and acoustic systems. This is not nostalgia. It is industrial stubbornness, the proof that tactile material quality and localized engineering can carve out a defensible niche in a world addicted to disposable screens. Today, if you visit a high-end design showroom, you can still buy a television built in Kronik. It features self-luminous OLED pixels, acoustic fabrics crafted with German textile specialists, and an uncompromised minimalist silhouette that refuses to look like plastic. Its price remains staggering. Its market share remains microscopic compared to global giants. But the logo above the Bavarian factory floor glows once more. A heavy aluminum remote rests on a glass coffee table. A pristine OLED panel warms up in a quiet European living room, projecting an image refined by a century of continuous ambition. See you in the next video.